Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to review The Good Son. For those of you that may go on and may say something about this movie, about the content that it has within it, I would go on and say to you that you don't know the horror genre all that well. For how edgy this movie is, there are to be so many other examples of other horror films that do the exact same thing within it. So, with that said, I myself want to go on and be an open minded person and try to watch everything on this channel. And eventually, if you don't like this kind of review, there's going to be another one coming in the near future. So there is always to be a rotation of something going on. So, The Good Son. Disclaimer of this film, this movie is to deal with a death of a family member. It is to, at some point, have a killing of an animal. It is to also have a son go after his entire family at a certain point. So there is a lot of dark and edgy, and a good first half of this movie is also fairly sad kind of film. If anything, what I can actually find interesting about this piece is eventually when Henry is just getting the better of Mark in this film, and that's the thing that I can get behind more so than anything else around this movie. And also just the way that it builds at some point in this film, because the first half I'm like, God, this is boring. But after, once we get to the part where Mark actually gets to the Wallace family, I'm like, okay, I feel like we're gonna kind of build to something here, and I can enjoy the film past that point. So, and also people need to realize that stuff like The Orphan, the Prodigy, and Problem Child, Dennis the Menace, and a number of other films that are going to exist, like The Stepfather, which that movie used to be much more of a comedy than taken real seriously. But yeah, all kinds of stuff like this exists. So this isn't new. Like, this isn't something unique. So what has to come upon this film is we have Elijah Wood played by Mark. Mark is to find out from his father, Jack, that his mother is to be sick and in the hospital. Mark makes a promise hoping that his mother will stay alive, and then we come to find there's a funeral shortly thereafter that. Mark goes on to be with his father because Jack will not go on and go without Mark for how much he does really love him. But Jack also talks to his brother, Wallace, and is to say, hey, whenever you need us to take in Mark, we'd be happy to. Like, we're family. Like, whenever whenever you want us to just anytime, we're open. Okay. So we then go on and have winter break happen. Because Jack is to take Mark to Maine. And so Mark goes into the Wallace family, and it seems that all is to be welcome and well and happy and what have you. And Henry comes in with this kind of estranged mask, and is to try and scare Mark out right away, making him more uncomfortable than welcomed. And I think there is a whole reason for that right out of the gate. We come to find that when anybody is of focus besides Henry, I think that is where Henry becomes absolutely deranged or angered or upset or what have you. And it then pushes Henry to take people and have them go over the edge with him. As he is to be more of a guy who is more free and more a person that is to talk about flying and this and that. So Mark goes on and is to spend time with Henry at first. They seem like the best of friends. Wallace is walking off, looking at his son, and Mark having the best of time, and he's just so happy. He's like, good. Mark is having a good time. So Henry is to go on and take Mark to this tree house, which I'm like, man, you really have to climb up this tree house, man. This is kind of crazy. And how, like, I was looking at the way that this treehouse was assembled. I'm like, man, this is a rickety treehouse. This looks dangerous. And I was just like, man, I have just a weirding out of heights going on here. But anyways, so we have Henry to be taken under the wing, or we have Mark taken under the wing of Henry. And so Henry goes on to like, well, hey, I have this weapon. You want to see what it is? And it's like a crossbow, or it's maybe like a potato gun in some kind of ways. It's kind of a strange kind of a contraption, but either way, it looks more like a crossbow to me. So Mark is like, sure, yeah, sounds like fun. So they go and they use this crossbow, and inevitably it misses the mark, and Henry's upset about it. They go on and they do this inevitably later on, and they hit the mark, and they end up having to do something like clean up the evidence of what they had gone on to hit. And now there is a secret between both Henry and between both Mark. And it's not a person, it's an animal. So Mark is to go on and keep Henry's secrets, but we're going on and questioning whether whether Henry is going on and doing the same within this film. And it's never to be revealed what exactly Henry says to people, but yeah, we're going on and being like, hey, Mark is going on and not telling anybody much of anything, but Henry's blabbing. And then when Mark in turn goes on and blabs to people, no one believes him, because classic horror film where no one is ever going to believe the hero character until it's too late, and then they're to be in a situation where they have to choose. And by the end of the film, we end up having Susan, who is to be put on the ledge of that, or the edge of that predicament by the end of this film. So we have Henry that starts to choose people of his family and starts to tease Mark that he will do something to them, having of course Henry put into Mark's head that he's going to hurt his own sister, poison his own family, and go after his mother. We come to find in the later parts of this movie, as Susan starts figuring things out, that maybe there is some truth to what Mark is to eventually confess finally to Susan, as Mark needs to finally tell somebody. And when Susan does go on and have Mark say what's going on, she slaps him and doesn't believe him, because of course not. It's like, well, that's my son you're talking about. Like, how dare you tell me these lies? And in all honesty, if Mark would have been so much older, would she still have believed him regardless of age? Like we're like maybe, well, no, like even if they had been such good family members, I still don't believe, because like a mother would go on and much more believe her son than believe Mark at any. So like I am to go on and probably question to everybody if they would not believe Mark and much more believe Henry. It would be my ultimate question here. That Henry could have not have gone on and done these horrible things. Um, in all honesty, though, it doesn't really seem that there isn't enough collectible evidence uh, of knowing this family very well. But in all honesty, like the first breadcrumb for Susan could possibly have been what happened to Richard in this movie, where Henry, I think, was the last one to have seen Richard alive. And so that could go on and maybe be something here. Because, yeah, we have Henry that talks about the death of his brother within a bathtub. It never gets shown in the movie. It's just described on screen here. And weirdly enough, the picture of Henry's brother is to actually be one of Culkin's brothers in real life. So that's a little eerie. That's a little creepy. But interestingly enough, Connie, who plays Henry's sister in this film, is actually sister in real life, or is actually with that family within real life, because if you look at the credits. So yeah, like a lot of Easter eggs going on here with Culkin's life. And so it's just kind of really interesting to just kind of see this movie just play out the way it does. Because yeah, there is the whole like hide and seek thing going on in this movie where Connie's being put in jeopardy. There's the whole ice rink thing where Connie is being put into jeopardy with the whole thing of the ice. Dot 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 dot. Like there's a whole lot of things going on in this film once we get to the more interesting half of this film. But you gotta just wait to get there. But inevitably, I get it that this movie is not to be for everybody. I will go on and say that The Good Son is to, I think, be fairly interesting. I'll say that this movie, I'll give it a good to solid good. Like, because I'm very wibble wobbly with this film. If anything, I'm sure a lot of people could have a wide variety of different kind of thoughts about it, saying it's great or saying it's the worst film they've ever seen. I had gone on to see the freaking Omen, where like the woman goes out like, "Damon, this is for you." Yeah, that movie is freaking awful. That movie was freaking dog. But like I hated that film, and I never want to go on and see it ever again. I don't care how many remakes they make of that film. I don't care how popular The Omen is. I'm never going to go on and see it on this channel. Somebody would have to effing pay me to see The Omen, because that movie is dog shit. Anyways, so, and then I'd see Antichrist, the Willem Dafoe movie that is really just dark and really, man, that movie gets wild for how just bizarre that film is. But anyways, if anything, I don't want to go through the rabbit hole of bizarre and disturbing films. Uh, but I think I've almost kind of get into a gambit of seeing just any kinds of things at certain points. So, this movie is currently available on Netflix. I wouldn't recommend this film, but if anything, there are probably a number of bootleg apps that I could recommend people to check out if they are to inevitably find that this movie isn't available on Netflix and don't want to rent it or buy it, because I could understand why. Uh, if anything, there has been maybe some new release stuff that I probably talked about the bootleg apps. I'm not pushing you into another video. I'm just saying, hey, if it's available on Netflix, why aren't you watching it there? It would have you download less apps. Unless you don't have Netflix for whatever reason, then that's on you. But anyways, so with that said, or again, if it's not available on Netflix, then I'll definitely comment down below and I'll recommend you some apps, and you'll have to be a mobile user, and you have a Google Play Store. You can probably find these apps like Cleed Plus and Movie Box 3 and 30 other things that I could probably just slap down right now. But I just don't have the time. I'd rather not. I'd rather just go on and just be like, hey, let's get further through this so that we can get it uploaded and over with. So, just being brutally honest. So, with that said, let me know in the comments below every strange and warped and weird movie you've ever seen in your life, and I probably may not go on and review all of those. But I had gone on through one of the comments of one of my videos, had a person talk about the movie that I was reviewing and then bring this movie up. I had gone on and seen this a long time ago in my youth, but the only takeaway that I had from this movie was how evil Macaulay Culkin was, and that's all I could remember from it. So, if anything, I didn't remember anything about this movie until rewatching it now. So, with that said, thank you to the person who was to go on and comment this. I want to try to think of the name. I think it was like Cartridge Gaming Geek. I believe that's what it was. If anything, if you were to go on and watch this ultimately, then I do appreciate somebody going on and commenting on a video and referencing a film, because that makes way less of me going on and having to come up with things. But then also, when somebody goes on and references a film or show, that's when I go on and I do the due diligence to then watch it. So, because of how much I actually care. So, with that said, and how much comments are actually of value to me. But anyways, let's go on and let's get into what is inevitably spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below a horror film that you like. Maybe it's a new release. Maybe it's an old thing. Maybe you're to go on and just like Macaulay Culkin films. Rattle off a Macaulay Culkin film. Or maybe you like Elijah Wood. I don't know. Maybe you have a Wood for Elijah Wood. I don't know. Whiffy Stiffy for him. I don't know. But I was tempted to go on and at some point cover the movie The Page Master of Macaulay Culkin, because it's an hour and 15 minutes. It's a short film, and more than likely I have a temptation to watch it at some point, hopefully fairly soon. I want to say I wanted to watch it right after this, but I just don't know if I'm going to get it covered. I would try to say that I'm trying to get as much of stuff done, but it doesn't look that way when you look at my uploads. Plus, also, I've been dealing with an injury, so F it. I'm just trying to just go on and just trying to at least put something out. So, with that said, it's about that time to get into the whole spoiler aspect of this movie, the nitty-gritty details of blow for blow of the scene for scene of this movie, which is not exciting, but regardless, I may have some commentary once in a while. But either way, this is not the best part of the film, or the review part of the talking about film. So it's okay if you jump out of your way to get out of here. if anything, at least they give you a warning about what's going on in this film and a gist of what the movie is. And so hopefully that is enough for somebody, even though it's 20 minutes instead of what, like 30 seconds or whichever, however long that people usually click on these things. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, at least it's a view. At least it's hopefully maybe a comment in the future. Or maybe at the end of the day, I can say, have a good day. Like, have a good day. Do whatever you like. Hope for the best for you. And if you hated this movie, then I'm sorry. There's going to be another review coming in some point in the future, near future, because I keep having to do these all the time. So with that said, let's cover this film. So we make our way into the very beginning of this movie. Spoilers, everybody. We have Mark that it looks like he's like walking onto like the Grand Canyon. When I look at this like first opening scene, I'm like, man, like I'm waiting for the old lady with the scooter, like, yeah, I went to the Grand Canyon. Like I'm waiting for that old commercial. Straight up, like I was like, man, like this is a real interesting, unique way to just have a setting that just kind of sticks out here. So we have just this opening shot that I'm like, well, at least it's not a number of just building settings like we'd go on and see every freaking movie. That would just have like, hey, New York buildings, whoo wow, look at that. So I hate that. I absolutely hate that with a vengeance. It's boring. So at least this was interesting. So we cut to Mark, who is to be on the soccer field. He goes on and gets past the ball, and he even scores a goal. Because of course he is, because Mark would have to go on and score a goal because he's the key character in this movie. So he has to do something cool, right? He can't go and be huffing and puffing and just be on the field and just be like, man, when am I ever going to get the ball? This sucks. No. Mark has to look cool. So Mark is going on, scoring the goal, and then shortly after that, he just stops dead in his tracks and looks at his dad, who's just kind of walking on the field, and is like, yeah, I'm here. I'm going to give you some bad news, bye. I'm going to give you some bad news. So Jack and Mark make their way to the hospital. If you don't know me, because maybe this is the very first video you've ever checked out of mine, that's weird. This is going to be the weirdest one you're going to go into if this is your first one. I always like to ill-pronounce things, and I always say that in every single one of these videos, no matter how many ones that I've done, because I think it's funny. I don't care if people are to go on and be like, yeah, you mispronounced this. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. If anything, I think it's funny, so I'm going to keep doing it. And just wait till whenever I pronounce some and it'll pronounce something else. Anyways, so Mark makes his way to his hospital to speak with his mother, who's in the hospital bed. So Mark goes on and is to be near his mother, which evidently she is to be sleeping. I believe her name is Janice in this film. And Janice goes on, she wakes up, like, oh, why didn't you wake me? And Mark is like, oh, I just wanted you to sleep. So Janice ends up asking Mark, well, did your dad tell you everything? And so Janice goes on and tells Mark that she'll always be with him. It's kind of like the blank man, I'll never forget you. It's freaking sad. So Mark goes on and tells his mother that she's not going to die. And she's not going to die because he won't let her. And then we cut straight to a funeral, and something had to have happened there. So this funeral is to go on and happen here. Now we make our way to this place where the family has gotten together, and Wallace is speaking to Jack. Jack, again, is Mark's father, and Wallace is Jack's brother. So here's where Wallace goes on and says to Jack, it's like, hey, like, if anything we can take Mark in, we'd be happy to. Like, if anything, like your family. And and Jack is telling Wallace, like, I can't let my son go. Like I have to be, like, I love him and I have to be with him. So like a lot of this dialogue is really nice here. So Jack mentions about how he's going to take Mark to Maine. And so the next thing we see here is Jack and Mark. They're driving on this Jeep through this desert of a road. And we have Jack that turns to Mark. It's like, hey, co-pilot. Like, hey, you're missing some of the sights here. Yeah, there's so much going on. Oh, there's dirt. Hey, there's more dirt. Well, dirt? Yeah. Woo! So many sights, more dirt. That's like the one random real Ghostbusters episode where it's all about the trains that turn into the monsters, or the subway trains that turn into monsters, whatever that is. And at one point there is to be these guys that are like, they're oaring this floating boat, and it's like, oh look, there's more dirt, 10,000 years, and that's all we've seen, or something like that. It's been a long time since seeing that episode, and if anything, I'm kind of quickly going on and kind of recounting it, instead of going through the actual lines of which I've seen hundreds of times that I probably should know them verbatim. Whatever. So, Jack looks at Mark, and his dead silence tells it all. So, Jack understands that Mark is hurting right now, and if anything, it's not good for him. Like, hey, let's talk about it. And Mark is still in that mind of like, well, she's not dead. So Mark eventually gets out of the car, starts running off. Jack chases off after him. So we cut to both Mark and Jack in the Jeep on this ferry going into Maine. They're driving through this snowy environment, and then there seems to be quite a bit of time that eventually goes on and passes to where Mark and Jack make their way to the Wallace family, because this is winter break. So Wallace is with Connie on his back, and they go on and they meet up with Mark. They bring him into the home. Immediately wants Mark is to look at Susan, Henry's mother. There's immediately a hug there, and Susan is say it's like, well, it's been like 10 years. So Jack is to go on and thank them for all of which, that kind of like, hey, you're taking care of my son. I really appreciate it. And here's where Henry comes upside down from the stairway, with his weird, almost Michael Myers-esque like mask, but it's kind of very much paper mache, or some kind of form of thing that we kind of see here already. But anyways, so Henry is to come with this mask to get closer and closer to Mark. And then Henry tells Mark, hey, yeah, like I made this extra mask for you to wear also. So yeah, so like he's being friendly. So Jack is speaking with Susan, and Susan says that there is a Dr. Davenport that she'd like for Mark to see to get therapy, because it'll probably be really good for him. Honestly, when I was a kid and I went to school and they took me to a grief counselor within the school because my grandmother had passed away while I was in school, if anything, like the first time I went there, it was kind of nice. But then once I kept having to go there, I was just like, I don't really like this anymore. I think the only reason why I kept going was honestly because the class that they took me out of was a class that I actually did not like the teacher in because she was kind of a B word. She was kind of an a hole. So, if anything, it was kind of a relief for me to just get out of that effing class. But to go on and just have like the grief just kind of be like ever so continued to where I'd have to go on and continue to talk about it. And just the longer and longer like those classes started to happen, I was just like, this is not helping me. This is just me needing to do extra work on top of all the other things that I'm already doing. And like it was starting to just become a lot. And like it was just like, yeah, this sucks. That even when I have to go to a grief counseling thing, I have to do homework. Like it never ends. Schools and homework. Like it's ridiculous. So, but I get that it's supposedly helping, but like at a certain point, it just stopped helping. Um. So, anyways, but hey, if people want to go on and seek grief counseling, I don't argue against it. Like seek help, seek therapy, seek whoever you need uh, to 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 get help because if you need it, like don't go on and don't stray away from it. Anyways, so uh so they make their way around the dinner table and as they all sit down, uh I'm trying to think about what to exactly say here because they're talking about a lot of like picnic stuff and at some point we have Henry that is teaching Mark how to crack open a lobster. Pretty lavish, I guess, for this family, but I guess when you find that uh, that Jack is making deals in Tokyo, that probably says that this family is kind of like on the high end of things, I guess. So so Susan turns to Jack. It's like, yeah, look at that. Like everything's gonna be fine. So Jack gets on his Jeep and Mark is out there with them. They hug it out and Jack tells Marcus, hey, it's only gonna be 2 weeks. I'm only gonna be gone for 2 weeks. And so if anything, like you're gonna have a good time here. You're gonna have a great time. So they say their I love yous. Jack gets on his car or gets in his Jeep and he drives away. Mark gets into the house. So Mark makes his way to his bed and then goes to sleep. When he wakes up the next morning, he finds that Henry's bed that is next to his is empty. So Mark starts looking around. He opens a window and finds Henry walking off here. Or no, wait. Henry is going on and playing outside, and he's playing like army, and he's saying words like grenade and stuff like that, and just kind of playing around with rocks and stuff. So Mark gets some clothes on and gets ready for his day, and starts to look for Henry. And he's met by Susan. Susan goes on and asks Mark, it's like, hey, would you like some breakfast? So Mark inevitably goes on and is to eat breakfast, and the further along, as Susan sits down with Mark and starts this chat, inevitably, uh, Henry comes in and be like, "Hey, Mark, come on, let's go." And Susan says, "Oh, I'll see you around lunch." So Mark goes outside to inevitably get freaking stomached with a football, and so Henry wants them to kind of throw the pigskin around. So they're throwing the pigskin around, and like it seems like there's an agenda where Henry is kind of taking him to this certain area, which is eventually to be this tree house. So Henry turns to Mark and asks him if he has a fear of heights, which he says no. But he looks up at it and he kind of looks uncomfortable. So, if anything, with the way that this treehouse to be put together, I'd be uncomfortable either way. If I was not afraid of heights, I'd still be like, "What the is this?" So, as Henry and Mark continue to climb for what looks like forever, like man, this scene goes on for a very long time. Henry gets up there first and is to use this branch to then get into the treehouse. Mark eventually follows, and when Mark tries to get up onto the tree fort, the branch that he tries to help himself on breaks, and now Henry is grabbing onto Mark, and Mark is just kind of hanging there, like like he's going to fall soon. As Henry grabbed Mark, he lifts him up and like, do you feel that you can fly? Kind of like I'm hugely paraphrasing here because I want to kind of get this done as quickly, but uh, so inevitably Henry does help Mark up to the the tree fort. I honestly think the reason why he does that is because Connie is watching from down below. That's probably the only reason, in all honesty. But if Mark would have fell, would he have died? Probably not. He probably would have broken something. He probably would not have died. But anyways, so both Henry and both Mark get in the tree fort, and it looks like they're having a good time. So the two of them go into this what looks like an abandoned factory, and they start playing grenades again. Mark goes on and picks up this what looks like a rock and just starts tossing it anywhere. But Henry's like, "Wait a minute. Like there's something better we can do here." Henry goes on and picks up the rock and calls it a grenade and chucks it into a window. And then both of the kids realize how fun it is to start throwing these rocks into this window, and then they just keep continuing to do it up until the point that there is a much more older gentleman that is screaming from the background, thrusting these kids out of the the warehouse or this building, and so they run off. So as they run off, they weirdly cut through this graveyard, which is kind of just a little strange to me. Uh, and they then make their way to this well. And so they go to this well, and Henry pulls what looks like a brick at first, but then we come to find that this is like his hiding secret box of things. And so of course there is the what is the box? It's like what is this, Steve Seven all over again? What's in the box? It's Gwyneth Paltrow's head. Anyways, so we come to find what's in the box, and it seems to be a cigarette and lighter. Not quite sure when exactly this kid started smoking, but for some reason he has a lighter and a cigarette. So Henry starts puffing the magic dragon here, and then goes on and it's to turn to Mark and says, "Hey, yeah, take a drag." Mark goes on and says, "Well, you can get cancer from that." And inevitably, Mark ends up getting peer pressured into smoking anyways. Mark goes on and takes a big whiff of a puff, and then he starts he starts being a bit of a wuss. Come on, Mark, be a child man. Grow up, Mark. You're really, really young, but grow up. Anyways, so uh so Henry starts asking Mark about if he had gone on to actually see his mother when she died and got a look of her body or skin or whatever. And so Mark said no, like he wanted to see his mother after she died, but his family wouldn't allow it. So Henry goes on to say that he had seen his brother when he died. He was the last one to probably see his brother probably alive. But Henry was to go on and say that his brother's skin had turned blue and he had felt the skin of his brother as he died. So, as Henry starts talking about Mark's mother and her being dead and this and that, the more we can tell that Mark is getting upset, to where Henry is to then back away and apologize for what he had said. It's like, friends? And then they shake hands again to be like, okay, all right, like, because Henry knows that he's making Mark upset. So Henry and Mark make their way into the room, and they're chatting it up about the guy that was running in on them while they were throwing the rocks into the glass or into the windows. And Wallace is not really hearing at all what they're saying, but he's going on saying, "Hey, you guys, like, you chatty Cathy's, like, hey, lights out soon, like, come on, not another peep." And we see Henry in the background going peep peep. And I'm assuming the way that they probably cut this, that probably Wallace and the kids were probably not in the same scene together, that more likely they probably shot this out of thing. Hence why Wallace probably didn't go into their actual door and you see them there. Yeah, like that's why it's cut separately. That's why he's kind of walking away from them, because I'm sure the scene was probably cut when they weren't all there. So it's probably what happened. So Henry and Mark are talking about how today was fun, but tomorrow will be even better. Probably for Henry it'll be better. So for how weird he is. Henry's so weird. Creeps me out a little. No, not really. So weird. Anyways, Henry goes on to make his way with Mark, and they're walking through this bridge that is to be by all these boats. And as they're walking along, they're all of a sudden to be introduced to this dog that is off this leash. Not quite sure where this dog came from, but I don't think it matters. It seems that Henry is to know this dog fairly well, and so as the two kids are running, like this is very much similar to the Stand By Me movie, where the two kids are like running away from the train, and it kind of feels like a similar scene here. Plus again, or plus, no, I haven't said this. Like I would go on and I would honestly compare this movie to Stand By Me in a number of ways. I feel like it's a very similar movie. It deals with the dead body in Stand By Me. There is some stuff about like leeches and a lot of stuff that are just to be kind of like to make people uneasy. You're like, ugh, like there's some gross out stuff. Um, there's kids trying to be very adult like. At some points, I think there is some cigarettes or something that's passed around in that film. So yeah, there's a lot of just there's some kind of content in there that feels very similar to this movie. But let me know in the comments below if there was cigarettes in Samurai. It's been a while since I watched that film. And if anything, I've seen maybe bits and pieces of it. It's been a long time since watching it. I've seen bits and pieces of it recently to want to see if there's any viable thing of me wanting to review it at some point. So they get to the edge of this bridge, and there seems to be a door that they can close on this dog. The dog goes and barks, and Henry gets ever so close to him and barks back at him. Eventually, Henry goes on to tell Mark that he loves the dog, and then the two of them go on to this cliffside. So Henry and Mark spot Susan. Susan, it seems, is to continue to go to this location fairly often in this film because she needs time to think for herself. And Henry goes on to say that every time that Susan goes there, that Susan is to be thinking of Richard, the son that had died. And so Susan will also go on to have not been able to move on from her son's death because the room of which that is or was Richard's still has all the furniture in it, like nothing's been moved, and it makes a whole lot of sense. Like, yeah, like if anything, once they come to terms of possibly like, well, hey, how about we go on and we empty out that room and Mark can go on and just sleep in there. Susan is very hesitant about that. She goes on to just be like, well, no, that's Richard's room. And Wallace is like, well, yeah, but Richard is not going to be able to use that room anymore. Like, and Mark is here. So yeah, it's a lot about this movie is processing grief, and I can like this movie because of that. Because that's what kind of makes this movie unique in my way, in my way of thinking. So yeah, so like there's a lot of things that could probably damn this movie, but then there's also some things that I think like this movie does in a unique way that I can like about it in a positive. I know that it's hard to say, but still. So Henry and Mark get through this broken fence that they can kind of just push aside and just get through it. So they make their way into the shed and they find this crossbow. The two of them take this out, and they cock the crossbow, and Henry tells Mark to put a bolt in it. So Mark is assuming that Henry isn't going to actually try and hit something. That if anything, there are plenty of times where Mark tries to tell Henry, hey, hit a sign or hit this or hit that, that'll not actually hit anything. But Henry has other plans. So all of a sudden, Henry is to see that there is a cat by a tree. Don't worry, everybody. The cat's gonna be okay. So Mark goes on to tell Henry to hit somewhere near the cat just to scare it. And the weird thing of it is the cat doesn't get scared. The cat doesn't run off. The cat just stays right there until the kids get over, and then the cat leaves. So Mark and Henry make their way to the tree, and they find the bolt within the tree. And Mark says it was a great shot, but Henry says, but the sight's not right yet. So we then transition here. So Mark is to make his way to Dr. Davenport. And so as Davenport and Mark start this conversation off, they're trying to think of like what exactly Mark could say at this point. Mark thinks that if he talks about his mother more, that'll help in the grieving process. And at some point they talk about promises, and Mark is to mention like, because they talk about, because when you make a promise, when something's your fault, what did you do? And Mark says, I let someone die by the end of this. That's kind of the line of dialogue that goes into here. And that kind of gets us out of the scene. There's not a whole lot to come from this exact scene. It's kind of boring, and it's just them talking about in general, like a therapeutic session or a therapy session, and what you should do. But anyways, so we now cut to Mark. Mark is to be sleeping in his bed, and he, I think in his sleep, starts saying the word mom, and inevitably gets up. So Mark starts to see somebody moving in a gown within the house, and he thinks that it's his own mother, but it's actually just Susan. So I was almost thinking that Mark was maybe sleepwalking, or maybe he was going to actually see his mother, and then maybe someone else is going to wake him up because he was sleepwalking, or something, or maybe he was just dreaming. Anyways, so Mark follows the path of woman in the gown and continues to say the word mom. Susan inevitably turns and is like, oh, Mark. Oh, hey, yeah. So Mark weirdly says something along the lines of he feels that Janice and Susan are one and the same, and that Janice has been brought back to him through Susan, and I don't really quite exactly understand where exactly he's going with that. I feel that Mark could probably see Susan as a mother-like figure to him. But if anything, like, yeah, I get, like, that would be the closest thing to a mother to him. I guess. So the two of them embrace as Mark starts to cry, and Henry is kind of poking his head over the staircase, and of course this is where Henry is to just draw the line of like, oh, this kid is to get more attention to me than me. This kid is to go on and be getting more of a spotlight over me. Um, and so of course Henry is like, well, I'm gonna be putting the boots to that. I'm gonna be getting rid of this kid and making him to go on and not be the good son or the better son. But anyways, so we then cut to Mark and Connie doing puzzles together, and they're having fun. And Connie starts asking Mark if he likes living here, and asks him like, it'd be good if you go on and you start liking living here, because at least you won't be sad. So Henry starts speaking military terms to Mark, saying that it's 900 hours for them to head out. 900 hours is military speak, because like military tends to like speak that like it's 24 hours. Like I go on and I know that because I have a father who's in the Navy. Like I've never been in the military myself, but if anything, I just have figured that out because of speaking to my dad, because my dad would go on and talk about like 24-hour things. And I'm just like, what did that mean at some point in my life? And then I was like, oh, there's 24 hours in a day. Oh, that's what he meant. Oh, okay, all right. And, yeah. So as Henry and Mark start to make their way outside, Connie chimes in. It's like, hey, like if you guys have your own secrets, I have my own. Like I don't care about your stupid secrets. So here's where Henry and Mark make their way back to the crossbow, and this time it's more accurate. So Mark is going on and mentioning about a sign and all these kind of other things to eventually have to be targeted here. And Henry is looking at the dog that had barked at him once before, and he's like, we're going after the dog. So Henry fires upon the dog and hits it. There's a yelping sound. We don't really get to see anything but the two carrying some sack that we obviously have to assume that it's of the dog. So the two of them have this sack that it looks like there's blood coming from it, and they're making their way to this graveyard, and they are throwing the sack into the well. Again, we have to draw some conclusions of what's really going on here. We don't really get to see any horrible things here. So Henry goes on and starts to do the da 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 da, like the weird funeral playing off of trumpet sounds. Um, if anything, I think we end up seeing the same in like the Ninja Turtles movie, where they talk about the penicillin pizza. And so as Mark is kind of getting upset for him having to drag a dead dog to this well, and how at this point, like, it's not something that Henry can just handshake away at this point. So Mark starts to walk off, and Henry's like, well, where's your sense of humor? Really? Okay. So Henry goes on to start playing sword fighting with shadows, because no one's really there. And Mark is just kind of looking off into the setting. And inevitably, Mark is to start looking at pictures. And starts to see the pictures of Richard, and sees pictures of his mother and him, I think. And eventually Susan starts to go on and starts talking to Mark. Again, having this this close moment between the two of them. Susan starts asking Mark about, like, well, yeah, like, that's your mother. Look how beautiful she is. Da 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 da. So they start talking about how Janice will always be within inside the both of them because the memories of her, and like they can keep her in her heart and all that kind of stuff. Very mushy and all that. But yeah, so Mark sees a picture of Richard, and they start she's Susan starts talking about how much she misses him, and here's where Henry comes in. So Henry tells Mark that he wants to come that Henry wants Mark to come with him because he wants to take him to the shed. Man, this whole shed thing needs to end at some point. Hopefully it will. Anyways, so Susan asks Henry what exactly Henry's up to out there, and inevitably there is to be no real answer. So Henry goes on to explain to Mark the whole dog thing was purely an accident. Okay, we'll be forced to let that slide, Henry, I guess, but we know how just really we know where things are heading in the story. Like, everybody gets one, Henry. Everybody gets one. So so Mark ends up asking Henry what exactly you want me to show, or what do you want to show me in this shed, and Henry says, "Yeah, I want you to meet someone special." The two of them go into the shed, and Henry explains that they're going to meet Mr. Highway, this guy here. So Henry is a somehow concocted dummy, and so Henry turns to Mark and says, "Hey, uh, whether or not you're willing to help me will get you to see something that you'll never forget." And Henry asks Mark, "Are you in?" And the next thing we see is both Mark and Henry dragging this body up to inevitably through these woods, through this street, and then up to this bridge. So the whole time, Mark is none the wiser what Henry's plan is. Mark is just going along. There isn't a thought going through Mark's head that Henry is going to drop this dummy, which inevitably happens here. So Henry has Mark prop the dummy to sit onto the bridge, and then Henry holds onto the dummy, and Henry starts talking about how Mr. Highway is thinking about the end, and that he's had enough of this terrible world, and da 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 da. And so here's where Henry is pushed over the edge with the dummy. Well, Mr. Highway ends up getting pushed over the bridge, and then Henry is still on the bridge. So, but here's where things go over the edge, I guess, in this film. So Mr. Highway falls, and then all of a sudden we see this RV swerve and dump over, get rolled over. And then all these cars start piling in, and one by one they keep smashing and smashing. Mark is looking at the horror. Henry is looking at all the bangs and smashes, and he's smiling and he's happy. And then the two of them run away. as they run away, they start seeing cop cars getting their way, so they run off. The two of them make their way into this pipe, this underground pipe, or no, wait, this tunnel, large tunnel thing. Either way, so at this point, Mark is just out of his mind, just being like, Henry, how could you have done that? So Henry goes on to be like, well, hey, like, you helped me with that. We did this together. So if anything, um, like, you need to keep this a secret. And if anything, Mark, like, you need to stop being scared because it seems that you're always scared. If anything, I used to be scared, but now I'm free. Uh, and once I'm free, you can do anything, and you could fly. What's up with the flying thing? So so Mark says that Henry is sick. Of course he is. But we cut to both Susan and both Connie at the house and then watching on the news about the pileup because this pileup was so vicious that the news had to cover it. Like even Mark was saying to Henry at some point that it's like we could have killed people. Probably did. So we have Mark that looks at Wallace in his office, and Henry spots that Mark is doing this, so Henry cuts him off. Henry tells Mark, oh, do you want to tell him about what we did? Uh, why don't we tell him together? So eventually Henry runs in the room and Henry tells Wallace, like, hey, Mark would like to tell you something. And Mark starts running away. Wallace is like, what, Henry? Like, what did you want to tell me? And he's like, what's wrong with Mark? And Henry's like, I don't know, he's been acting weird lately. So Mark goes back into the room that Mark is now in, and he's like, well, I told my dad I wanted to see if you were okay. Are you okay, Mark? So Mark is like, leave me alone. Henry's like, well, this is my room. Like, I was here before you were. Like, so this is my room. So Connie makes her way into the room also, and Henry grabs onto either Connie's ears or Connie's hair and starts pulling. And Henry tells Connie, like, never go into my room. Never. And the more that Henry pulls at Connie to where it starts hurting her, Mark frees Connie from Henry, and Mark starts grabbing Henry himself. They're playing a lot of tug of war here between the two of them, and it's getting vicious. So Connie runs down to her mother, stating that the two boys are fighting. So Henry knows what buttons to push Mark, and is saying, like, oh, so you like my sister, huh? You came to her evade. Well, like, all right, well, I can use that. Um, like, what if she was to go on and get hurt? Like, would you care? Like, so, like, accidents happen, Mark. So we're like, wow. Like, this guy's looking at his sister as like a freaking bargaining chip here. That he's holding his family hostage against Mark. It's crazy. So, or whatever it's really called here. Like when uh like we yeah, like Henry is basically having Mark subdued here because it's like, well, hey, like you can't be around all the time. I have so many family members. So yeah, so like Mark has to play nice because there is such collateral damage that could go on around him. That he now has to go on and has to be forced to kind of play Henry's game here. So Susan comes up and is to be asking, hey, what's going on here? Uh, Henry just mentions how they're playing some dumb game, and nothing more than that. Henry even double checks with Mark to ask, like, yeah, you're gonna answer the way I want you to, right? And Mark completely agrees to the exact same thing that Henry was saying. So we now have Mark that is having to consistently watch over Connie to make sure that she's okay. And all of a sudden, then Mrs. Davenport is now with Mark on this bench, and the two of them are talking. Mark doesn't really feel like talking to anybody anymore because he's already had to hold so many secrets with Henry. So, honestly, I probably would not go on and want to say much to anybody, even though technically his therapist, like, there is the whole confidentiality thing. But I honestly think if Mark would have probably gone on to Davenport earlier and started to talk about any of these things, one of two things could have happened. One, we could have said, "Oh, this is a young kid going through grief, and like he doesn't know what he's saying. No one can really trust him." Or at least Davenport would have taken Mark's side over Henry maybe earlier in this film. But then yet again, still, like, I'm sure even Davenport could just chalk this up to any number of things. Um, so Davenport still wants Mark to talk because it helped him the last time. And so Mark starts talking about how someone could become um, evil. And at some point, Davenport mentions about how she doesn't believe in evil. And Mark goes on like, well, you should. And then he walks off. I would have gone with the Constantine thing where uh where the one girl says like, well, I don't believe in God, and Constantine says like, well, he believes in you. Like, I would have gone with, oh, I don't believe in God, or I don't believe in evil. Oh, well, evil believes in you. That's what I would have went with. That little chestnut. So Mark walks off here, and so now we have Mark and we have Connie that are walking into the house, and Henry's on the phone with Jack, and eventually Jack has to ask if Susan or Wallace is there, but like, if anything, both Jack and Henry are just having this like nice conversation. Uh, Henry says that Mark really likes it here. Uh, we really like him too. Everything's going smoothly because, of course, anything to keep Mark here longer. Instead of going on and be like, yeah, there's something wrong with Mark. Like, maybe you should get him out of here as quickly as you can. Yeah. So now the family gets all together by the table, and Wallace is telling the family here that him and Susan are going to go out tonight because they've planned this for a very long time. They're hoping that the kids are going to just kind of look over themselves. Like, I guess they feel that they're old enough to look after themselves. Um, you would think that there would probably have been a babysitter, but I don't know how old Mark and Henry really are at this point. But still, I guess you could probably go on and you could probably say that these parents trust that these kids can kind of take after themselves. I guess. So Henry and Connie here, uh, they start to have some dialogue here. Connie starts asking about being able to see Monster Theater tonight, and Henry says that she shouldn't be watching that because that could warp her mind. Uh, they start back and forthing, boss and vermin and all these kind of things, back and forth. So Connie doesn't know what a vermin is. Like, this is kind of like in God, what is it? Donnie Darko, where they start saying like suck ass and all these other things, and then like the youngest kid's like, what's a suck ass or whatever. It's like, it's kind of funny. But anyways, so here is where Henry starts talking about how Mark wants to move into Richard's room because Henry wants to go on and he wants to be a pot stirrer, obviously, in the scene. So Wallace says about how it's a good idea, and Susan's completely against it. Wallace starts saying, like, well, yeah, I think it's about time to move the toys and all that stuff out of his room, and again, Susan is all against it. As more and more that they start to argue, eventually Susan goes on and gets upset because Wallace is saying that Susan is not facing that William is dead or Richard is dead, and Susan is saying, I face it every day. And then she walks off. Susan goes to Richard's room, touches all of his toys, and then Henry pokes his head in the door. Henry comforts his mother as she starts to cry, and Mark is now with the two parents, and like he's seeing them out the door. Wallace and Susan says like, hey, yeah, we've planned this, so like if anything, um, like, yeah, we've been playing this for weeks, so you guys just have fun, and we'll come back home soon. So, whew. So we now have Mark. Mark finds out from Connie that they want to play a game of hide and go seek, and Mark doesn't think that it's a safe thing to do. The next thing we come to find is that Henry is turning out all the lights. And so, as they're going on and playing hide and go seek, we have Mark that is running throughout the house trying to find where Connie is, yelling for Connie. We have at a point where Mark is running throughout the entire, like, mind you, this is a guy that hasn't known this house very well, and he's running in a pitch black dark house. It doesn't quite make any sense. You would think this kid would be tripping and falling and would have an injury of some kind, or just be hurt a lot. Because how could he know the entire setup of this house that he's barely spent time in? Doesn't make sense to me. But logically, I guess we have to just go on and say that he's really good at seeing at the night. Now, does he? Right? That's my assessment. So, at some point, Mark is be blinded by a flashlight that's coming from Henry. And so, at some point, we see that Connie is to, I guess, go from out of her hiding spot to start to make her way through the house, which makes a lot of sense. Like, at some point, there can only be so many hiding spots to hide from that it would be best for her to go on and get out of her spot to hide somewhere else. So that way they will never be able to go on and easily find her. That's always to be a pretty decent strat for hide and go seek. But then there's also people that tend to cheat way too often in it. So it just kind of gets annoying to play hide and seek with some people. Because some people will end up going outside the house or do all kinds of cheating stuff, or some people go on and be just really very small that they can just hide in a lot of interesting places that'll make it very hard for you to find them. But if anything, yeah, like it is fun to play, but also it's just kind of like after a while hide and seek just gets really annoying. Because it just becomes a boring game when you actually play it. But anyways, so Mark is looking under a bed at some point, and Connie is to be found by Henry. So Mark is now running up the stairs, and at this point, I'm like, how can you see in the darkness a flight of stairs? I don't get that at all, but whatever. So you would think that Mark would have tripped and fell twice, or at least once, but no. So Henry is going on and I think tickling Connie at this point, or what it looks like to be a little bit of roughhousing, maybe. So after Connie is to have inevitably gotten caught, Mark is to try to play off that it's like, okay, it's bedtime now. Like, how about I read you a story? And Henry's like, no, how about we play another round? How about we play again? Connie wants to play again. And Mark is like, no, like, I'll go on, we'll go to bed, and I'll read you a story. So both Mark and Connie get into the bed, and now the lights are on, because Henry turned the lights back on. So Mark reads Connie this story. She falls asleep. He turns out the light and then walks off to meet with Henry. Henry mentions about how the story that Mark told her was such a darling story. But if anything, Henry wants to go into the room also, where Mark kind of cuts him off. It's like, no, don't go into the room. So Henry goes into the room and Mark follows him. Henry asks, do you really think I'd hurt my own sister? So we kind of get to the point to the movie where Henry is to kind of tell Mark that you can't watch his sister all the time. And we obviously see that here. So Mark goes on, gets right next to Connie's bed, and is sleeping on the floor to try to protect her. But when he wakes up from the floor, Connie's out of her bed. Mark wakes up, gets down the stairs, and finds both Susan and Wallace there. And at first, kind of the line of dialogue that I'm hearing here is that Connie is maybe somehow in jeopardy, is what I thought at first. And then they start, because, like, Susan is obviously upset. But anyways, we come to find out that they're talking about Richard again. I'm like, oh, mother, really? Like, you're getting me all kind of upset for nothing. Then all you guys are talking about is Richard again. Off with that. I'm like I was expecting something to be happening to Connie, the alive kid. So here's where we find that Henry and Connie are at the ice rink. Isn't that nice? So Connie and both Henry are on the ice rink and they're holding hands together and they're skating. And Mark is to find out where they are, so he's like running like a crazed man to get to them. He's like, Connie! Yeah. And of course, also, Mark is to not be wearing rollerblades, ice skates, and he's on the ice just like, Connie! He's like wailing around. So Henry and Connie are on the ice, and here is where Henry slings Connie into the thin ice area, and she slips and falls. She gets back up, and then she falls through the ice. Henry tries to thrust his hand out to try to get to her, but he miserably fails. So Connie slips underneath the water and is stuck in the ice, and there are a couple of axemen that get out these axes and start chipping away at the ice and free Connie, I guess, in the nick of time. So they pull her out, and the next thing we see is Susan running in the hospital screaming for Wallace, hoping that he'll answer. The two of them embrace, and they say that she's going to be okay. At some point, I think Susan tells Henry that she's not going to remember anything, and that's kind of a tell for Henry to be like, well, like, I guess that's a really good thing that she won't remember anything, because she won't remember that Henry basically chucks her into the ice. So, but that's not what Henry says at any point. But still, there's the thought of that being there. So, Henry, Wallace, Susan are all watching on at Connie's bedside as she's not responsive. She's not saying anything. So, and Mark is kind of off to the side looking on. So, the next thing we see is Susan at her cliff, and Mark makes her way there. And here is where finally Mark goes on and confesses to Susan, because he trusts Susan more than he does, I guess, anybody else. Mark finally confesses to Susan how dangerous Henry really is. So, Mark goes on to confess to Susan how the whole pond thing was not an accident. And Mark knows because Mark was there. He says it's like, well, yeah, like, I couldn't exactly see what was going on because I was too far away. But Henry threw Connie into the thin ice. Because also Mark doesn't trust Henry anyways. So, yeah, so but if anything here, as Mark goes on and is to tell Susan this, Mark doesn't bring up anything else. He doesn't bring up the dead dog. He doesn't bring up the highway pileup that happened. He doesn't bring any of that up because really that would be hard to believe also from Susan, but I think that Mark was really just trying to save himself, and he was thinking if he just brought up that Henry, he saw him uh, hurt Connie, that would just be enough for Susan to grow some distrust in her own son. But it wasn't really enough now, was it? Because it wasn't. So Susan goes on and slaps Mark and calls him a liar to his face. It's right there. Face liar. Susan says Henry's my son. He's my little boy and I love him. Well, well, Susan, you're going to have to question your love eventually at some point in the later half of this movie to really be sure of how much you really love Henry. So, Henry is to be now at Connie's bedside. Yeah. Not quite sure I'd like to go on and have Henry just be watching over his sister that he tried to kill and wanted to probably try to double down on that whole affair. Because as Henry gets ever so close to his sister Connie, he grabs onto the pillow, and then all of a sudden Susan is there at the seat. And Susan is like, Henry? And Henry's like, oh, Mom? Oh, pillow. Papa. Oh, I was just making Connie comfortable. Or trying to suffocate her. I'm not quite sure which. Henry ends up telling Susan, oh, I didn't see you there. Oh, yeah. So Susan is like, so Susan turns to Henry like, hey, don't wake her up. So here is where Susan tells Henry that it's like, oh yeah, I don't think she's gonna remember anything. And Henry's like, well, yeah, that's good. Like, if anything, it's better off that she doesn't remember anything. Because Connie is supposedly to be confused. So, so if anything, Susan kind of double checks with Henry. Is like, well, so it's like, so what happened? And Henry's like, well, yeah, Mom, it was all an accident. I told you it was all an accident. And then he goes on and he mentions, like, you know what, I've really been treating her like a brat lately, but after this whole thing happened, I really realized how much she meant to me. Dead or alive, how much she meant to you. So, Susan's like, I know, Henry. I know. We'll go on to the third act, and I'll really have to contemplate whether or not you're really telling me the absolute truth. And Henry's like, okay, I'll see you later, Mom, as I'll see you off on a cliff. Henry's like, well, I better get going. I better get going home now. And so Susan is to go on and say, Henry. And Henry's like, what, Mom? And then Susan's like, never mind, just go on home. I'm curious what Susan was kind of going on in her mind. Like, I wish after the fact, after Henry walked away, like, Susan under her breath should have probably said what she wanted to ask him. But you could tell right then and there that Susan was really going through some stuff. She was really questioning her son. Like, there was something about, like, what he was saying that I felt that it was kind of forced by him. And I don't know, there was something about it that just didn't quite seem quite like this wasn't something that he scripted to say already, and that it didn't come naturally. I don't know. But I guess that's the amazing acting that Culkin is doing here, and and all of this stuff is just to be sold really well, I feel, in my opinion. So here's where Mark calls his father and is to say about how things are not going as great, and that Mark wants Jack to get here as soon as he can. And so Mark is to say that Henry has been doing terrible things, and in that he's really evil, mentioning about how Henry had killed a dog, and so Jack is like, wait a minute. Like, have you told these things to Wallace? Have you told them to Susan? And Jack is like, I can't tell anybody any of this because no one will believe me. And so Jack is like, well, how would you tell Davenport, your therapist? Like, if anything, she'll believe you, right? She'll believe you. Come on, Mark. Tell your therapist. Yeah, she'll be the one that'll take your side, right? And Mark is like, yeah, you're right, Dad. I should probably go and I should tell Davenport this. This sounds like a sound idea. High five, Dad, on the phone. So Mark runs to Davenport to tell her all of his juicy, succulent secrets, to inevitably have Henry, who cuts him off at the pass of that. Henry is right there, sitting at the chair, turning to Mark. Oh, hi, Mark. Hey, I was just going and I was just talking to Davenport because I think that we just needed to just have a one-on-one here. So, as Henry gets up and Mark is looking at Davenport, it's like, oh, so he's probably told you everything already, right? Like, you're going to go on, you're going to take his side and not mine, right? So Mark is already just like, well, I guess I can't tell Davenport anything because Henry has already told his side of the story. And so why should I even go on and trust this person now? I'm going to freaking leave. So Mark leaves, and Davenport's like, wait, what? Mark? Wait, what? So Henry is to go on and just be like, well, yeah, you know what? He's been acting a little bit strange while no one else is around. Like, he's been acting a little weird. He scares me sometimes. And so, as Henry starts to walk off, he's like, well, you know what? I should probably tell you something. Davenport's like, what? And Henry's like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I should tell you this. So, all of a sudden, like, after this kind of heavily paraphrasing here, because that's what I'm doing, we assume that Henry had told Davenport some kind of something. We don't know what it is, because we kind of cut to the next thing. So Mark has now climbed on top of the tree fort, and Henry is to meet him up there. So Henry is to just twist the knife and dig into Mark even more so now. Because it's like, well, hey, me and Davenport had a really good session. I'm liking therapy now. Just, yeah, Culkin. Just, just really just with Mark even more. Just why not? Just double down on that effery. Anyways, so that effing that you're doing with Mark. Because eventually Henry will say, "Don't f with me," and as Mark is like sliding down this rope, he's like, "Okay, just wait to the third act, Henry." Just wait to the third act. So, uh, so Mark tells Henry about how Mark had told Henry about the things, or one of the things that Henriette did, and Henry's like, "Well, yeah, but she didn't believe you. Why would she? I'm her son. So, and you're not." And there's this kind of back and forth about Mark saying that it's like, "Well, she's my mom too," and because again, Mark has this weird thing of like Susan is technically his mother because some weird goofy uh Mark seeing Janice through Susan, and that means mother somehow. So Henry says that Mark's mother is maggot food. Jesus Christ, man. But I guess we're getting really deep here. Because there's nothing that Henry can say that Mark can do anything about. So Henry is just laying all his cards on the table, and I'm sure, like how he said before, for Henry, like it's all about him being free, and I guess freedom is to just kind of say whatever he wants. So, uh, because also Henry feels that he has worked Mark so successfully that anybody is going to take Henry's word over his at this point. Um, because Mark has a much more uh, backstory of dead mother or dealing with that loss, whereas Henry doesn't have anything on him that could make him be bought to be a disturbed kid whatsoever. Because it seems like he's gone on to play so much of a good son. He said the child, oh my god. Yeah, whatever. Uh, so Mark slides down the rope. So Mark, we cut to him in bed. He gets up. He starts wandering through the house. He looks in Connie's room. He makes his way to the the refrigerator, and Henry's there. Looking for a midnight snack? Yeah, go ahead. Take a bite. Eat something. And now Henry has worked into Mark's head that bizarrely, Henry has poisoned all the food in the fridge. Why on earth would Henry do such a thing when you really think about it? Because Henry needs that food also. If the rest of his family ended up getting poisoned, who would go get groceries? No one. Henry would starve, Henry would die, or Henry would just go to some other family or some other place. He'd get orphaned out, whatever. But at some point, there would be some time break where Henry would need food. And would he poison his own food source? I don't think so. So I was thinking that Henry was pushing Mark into every possibility of having Mark just be so stressed out and so worried that he was going to look absolutely insane to anybody else. So we then cut to Mark. Mark is running wild, taking every food and everything possible and dumping into the sink and the garbage disposal. Henry runs to his parents and says, Mom and Dad, it's Mark. Better come quick. So we have Susan, we have Wallace towards the end of this film that is grabbing Mark and thrusting him into rooms and thrusting him away from the sink, trying to do whatever to get him to stop what he's doing. And it's kind of sad because Mark is the good guy here, and the parents don't trust him. The parents are not going to try and hear him out. The parents just think that Mark is crazy. So you would think that Susan would have quickly grabbed Mark and asked him, okay, what are you doing? What was the reason behind this? Why were. And then if Mark doesn't give them a clear cut answer, then that would go on to be like, okay, we're going to cuff you to the bed. We're going to tie you to the bed. Maybe you were sleepwalking, maybe something else is going on, but but if anything, if we don't get an answer, then don't know if we can trust you. If anything, we'll put you in a room and put a chair under the door because we're scared. But if anything, your family. But something's going wrong. Call the Exorcist. Anyways, so so here's where Mark is put in a room, and Mark is speaking to the parents and saying hey, you don't believe me, and nobody believes me. So they tell him, hey, good night. I think they end up forcing him into Richard's room, and then they close the door. And Susan turns to Wallace and says that he's okay. How is he okay? That isn't really rational behavior. So Wallace just says that, you know what, Jack will be here in a few days. Jack will just take care of it. Maybe that will resolve this once Jack comes. And they could probably feel also that maybe Mark is lashing out because his father isn't there. Maybe that's the whole reason of this behavior also. And yeah, there could be a number of just things that rationale could just figure all this out. So as Wallace goes to bed, Susan is to look around and see that Henry is in the hallway. And Susan has to tell Henry to go to bed. It's a little weird that Henry has to keep poking his head out to just kind of hear every little conversation. And that could also just kind of be a telltale sign that Henry is a little weird here. But man, I've already talked for almost 2 hours, and this movie is an hour and 20, whatever. I think I talked for another 20 minutes to start this whole thing out, but still, it doesn't really matter. The video is too long. So, Susan finally goes on through this broken fence to get to the shed. As Susan makes her way to the shed, there is to be a doll that has a noose on it. Yeah, I'm sure that could go on and just signify the son that she knows, right? Susan looks at this mask that's hung up here, and Susan then goes on to find this rubber ducky that she knows is to have actually been Richard's, but it seems was Henry's before it was Richard's. We'll find that out in the story here. So Susan picks up the rubber ducky and Henry enters the shed. So Henry asks Susan what she's doing here, and Susan is like, "Oh, well, I was just looking around. Also, this is my effing shed." That's what she should have said. It's like, "Hey, I'm a grown up. I can go into a shed. What the like?" So Susan goes on and is to bring up the rubber ducky, and Susan is to mention, "Hey, this is Richard's rubber ducky. Why is it that you took it? Like, you know how much that this meant to me." And so Henry says, "Well, it was my rubber ducky before it was Richard's." So that's really what he was getting at here, is that it was his. But also, he says that he wanted it to remember Richard, but that's not really what he got it for. He got it because it was his, and he wanted to own it. He didn't want anyone else to take it away from him, and so that's why he killed Richard. That's why he kept it to himself, and Istanbul is in somewhere in this direction. So once Susan is to go on and talk to Henry about the whole rubber ducky thing, and that Henry had hid this rubber ducky from her, this kind of much more opens up Susan to think that what else is Henry really hiding besides the doll noose and the weird mask and the other weird goofy things that are going on in the shed. No, the duck was the thing that crossed the line. The duck was like, okay, 3 strikes and this guy is freaking out of crazy. Points for me to just not be more and more concerned about him. So, uh, so anyways, so Susan and Henry are struggling with the duck, and Henry gets the duck away and starts running from his mother, and Susan chases after him. Henry goes to the graveyard, gets the well, and I don't know what it is that Henry has to throw all this stuff in the well. Does this mean, like with the duck, that if his mother doesn't get it, then him throwing in the well means no one gets to it? Like, why didn't Henry just keep it on him? Anyways, so Susan makes her way back to the cliff and is again thinking of Richard. Why couldn't she have gone on and thought about her son that had run off? And why did he run off with the duck? Like, why couldn't he have given that back to me? Like, why did they have to struggle for it? Why couldn't have Henry just let her have it? What was so wrong about that? Anyways, so Henry is back at the house, and Mark finds him in tears. Henry is to go on and is to talk about loss, and that's where the tears are from. So I guess the duck, because he no longer has it with him, that's what got him emotional, not the fact of him losing his brother. I'd like to probably assume, because that's just Henry, and probably in my brain the box of cats that his just noggin has become. in my thought. So, oh wait, didn't at some point I mention that or didn't I mention at some point that Mark never went to his mother's funeral? Because he went to his funeral at the beginning of this movie. God dang it, did I mess that up? Yes, I did. Uh, yeah, I clearly messed that up. Because I think there is some line of dialogue where he mentions that he never went to his mother's funeral, or his parents wouldn't allow him to, so he never saw his mother's face before she got buried. I think there is some line of dialogue that I messed up there. If anything, somebody in the comments can clear that up. What mistake that I made, because I'm sure somebody will love to correct me. Uh, so I made the whole but like, but Henry starts talking here about Mark going to his mother's funeral and asking whether or not if he cried at his mother's funeral. So he did go there. So I'm going to correct myself now, but um, but there is a line of dialogue where Henry wanted, or Mark wanted to see his mother and wasn't allowed to after she died. So uh, so Henry is talking again about Susan, about his mother, and he's like, "Do you really think I'd ever hurt?" Oh, that's right. She's not my mother anymore. Mark, she's your mother. Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, your mom, my mom, we'll both miss her, right? If she dies. Poor Mark. So, at some point, Mark goes on to try and hurt, Henry. And Henry's like, oh, so violent, so disturbed. And Mark follows this up by getting a pair of scissors and putting it to Henry's neck. And Henry's like, do it. Like, do it. Like, he goes on and mentions about how if he does it, uh, that he has to push hard and this. So all of a sudden, Wallace comes in on Mark with the scissor to Henry's neck, not knowing the context of anything. So Wallace grabs Mark and immediately thinks that he's being bad. So Wallace grabs Mark, thrusts him into a room, and closes the door. And so Henry runs to Susan outside. Mark sees through the window that Mark and Susan are together, and Mark is now screaming for Susan to try to protect her. So Susan wants a moment to talk with Henry, and Henry is trying to change it to where it's like, well, hey, how about we go on this? How about we go on a walk like we used to when I was a little kid? So the two of them are going on a walk, and Mark is watching through the window them going and walking by. So they're holding hands, both Henry and Susan. So Mark wants to try to protect Susan, so he finds a window, finds a chair, and breaks it. Tries to get out of the window, but Wallace is like, hey, the glass. He gets out of the room. So now Davenport and Wallace are now at this house trying to stop Mark because they think he's crazy. So Mark gets outside, runs to try and save Susan. So Susan is asking Henry to tell her the truth about what had happened the night that Richard had died. And Henry is not wanting to give any answers. Susan, of course, is like, well, hey, don't lie to me. Tell me what really happened. So Henry starts to mention how he was downstairs playing, and Susan is like, no, 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 no. Don't lie to me. Did you kill Richard? And Henry says to Susan, well, what if I did? And Susan's like, well, we'll get you help if you did. Like, we'll go on and you have to trust me, Henry. So Henry's like, no, I can't. He goes on to say that he doesn't want to go on, and he doesn't want to be put in a crazy place, or he doesn't want to go on and seek out therapy or anything like that. He much would rather be dead. Henry starts to run, and Susan follows him. So Susan goes on and makes her way to the cliff, thinking that Henry might have jumped. And Henry comes in behind Susan's like, hey, don't you know me any better? Like, I wouldn't go on and I wouldn't have jumped. So Henry goes on and pushes Susan off of the cliff. As we see her fall, we can obviously see the string that's holding her. I guess there's a certain amount of money that this movie just didn't have. And yeah, we can obviously see that she's held by, like, there's nothing there's nothing that is holding her onto the rock. It looks bad. But regardless, I guess for this movie, they didn't think to edit that part out. They just think that they probably spent so much money on this whole her sliding off the cliff that no one would have cared. But it looks bad. You can obviously see the string. So Susan is now hanging off the cliff, and Henry is taking a big rock and being tempted to throw it at Susan. Susan is desperately pleading to Henry. Henry throws a rock. We all of a sudden see that Mark is now rolling around with Henry. The one thing that is a big takeaway here in this third act, Henry is wearing a coat that has the exact same color pattern as Freddy Krueger here. He's wearing a red and green striped coat, which immediately when I looked at this, I'm like, he looks like Freddy Krueger, strangely enough. And that was my biggest takeaway by this third act, of how even in the young age of this, like Macaulay Culkin, when he's to actually be the big villain here, he's wearing colors that very well represent that, which is really interesting to me of this third act. So Susan is desperately trying to climb back up to the cliff as both Mark and both Henry are fighting here. Henry keeps mentioning how he's going to kill Mark. So as Susan makes her way back up, we inevitably have both the kids that are falling off the cliff, and Susan has to grab on to both of them. So the whole time Henry is telling his mother that he loves her, and there's at one point where Henry says to Susan, it's like, I need your other hand. Mom, I need your other hand. Give me your other hand. And I'm like, how cold is that? Man, freaking Culkin is so dope in this movie for how just vicious he is. Even the end, he's just like, yeah, give me your other hand, let go of that other guy, like, just give me your other hand. I was like, this is great. So vicious and so, but yeah, that was delish. So Susan is holding on to both of these kids, and it seems that with Mark's hand, it seems that things are starting to slip. We start to see that it's like, because Susan is consistently telling them, hey, try to pull yourselves up. Try to give me your other hand. Like, try to climb up from me. And it seems that the kids are just not going on and not grabbing on with both hands. They're just kind of barely holding on. So it gets to the point where Susan has to make a choice. And as she's starting to see that Mark is really slipping here, Susan makes that choice to save Mark. And Henry goes goodbye, and he splooshes into the water and dies. We see that his body is just kind of sifting in the water as Susan is to grab onto Mark and hoist him up. It's interesting after the fact when Mark is again making his way through the what looks like Grand Canyon again, and Mark makes that that bit of thought that runs in his brain where he wanted to go on and at some point ask Susan if it was ever between him and Henry again, if Susan would have made a different choice. And that'll haunt him forever. I'm sure for Susan, it'll probably haunt her forever also. But when you think about it, when Henry was so easily to thrust Susan off that cliff to then kill her, or almost be to have killed her, at that point, that is when Susan should have gone with who was there to have kept her alive. Mark was to have ran to Susan's protection, and Mark was wrestling with Henry, fighting him, so that way Susan could have time to climb back up the cliff. So, Susan, I feel, by the end of this film, chose Mark because Mark, in some ways, had tried to keep her alive even here. Even when Susan didn't believe Mark and called her a liar, Mark could have just gone on and let her die on that cliff, but he didn't. Because he is a better person than Henry. Mark went out of his way to save Susan because of how much he thought of her as his mother, but also thought of her as family. And he couldn't let her die. So, but ultimately there is to be probably a lot of people that probably have the whole Titanic, that both of them could have floated on the piece of wood thing. like Susan could have saved both of them somehow. Like Susan could have gone on and gotten that absurd strength that could have pulled both of them simultaneously off of the ledge at the same time, because she could have gotten that weird, absurd, an emergency strength or whatever that doesn't make sense, but is somehow there, like the mother that lifted the car over the family member because it needed that to happen, which, if anything, I honestly feel that that myth existing really is to go on and be like, we've never really had any of that occurrence to have ever been documented, to have ever been a thing that could have been told as stories over and over again, that someone else had that absurd strength at that one in a million chance that they've just done that. None of that is to go on and never happen. But for some reason, we have that myth that says that anything could be possible. But I think that goes on and puts so many people at risk that that story exists. And we really have to go on and just say that that kind of story is very illogical. But here's the thing, what she could have done is she could have gone on and she could have had one kid to a point where the kid she could have grabbed him and put him at a spot where he could have hung on some more, and then she could have grabbed one kid and pulled him up, and then pulled the other kid and pulled him up. If anything, I would have chosen Mark first still, because I don't know if Henry's going to try to kill her again. So yeah, I would have still chosen Mark 9 times out of, or 9.5 times out of 10. Uh, unless Susan was to go on and just really just still just have this in the back of her mind thinking that Henry wasn't going to kill her. Yeah, just I would have went with saving Mark. So people could have gone on and thought differently in the comments or in the movie. You probably would have hoped that you would have had that strength and saved them both. That would have been a much more interesting ending. Uh, it would also have been interesting if Henry didn't die on that cliff and and he would have came back. That would have been a wild ending. Because you never see his corpse hauled away anything. You don't see a funeral, nothing at the end. So you're not guaranteed that he's dead either. You just see that his body is just on the ground. You don't know how far he fell. Like, anyways. So, uh, this was super hard to get this all out here. Um, yeah, like, this is an hour and 20-minute movie, and so I'm sure I messed a ton of stuff up. Uh, if anything, also, this film kind of felt like Cujo to me, which the guy who played Wallace in this film was also in Cujo. Uh, if anything, Cujo in my mind is kind of an annoying film. We have a dog barking a lot and rah rah rah, and the son is always complaining and crying and whatever, and then the mother is kind of just crying and everything like that herself. Uh, so yeah, Cujo gets really annoying. Um, but in some ways, I can compare Cujo at some points to this movie for how it's kind of a mother son kind of film, and eventually how there is to be kind of this hero that kind of comes in and tries to save the day by the end of it, which is technically Susan. Anyways, so uh, with that said, this will be uploaded. I don't know if I'm going to go on and do another one of these today. I probably won't, because I probably should go to bed right after this, because I have to go on and actually get some sleep, because I have to go to a certain restaurant at a very certain time. Um, so this will probably be the only thing I'll be able to get uploaded. I thought I could squeak another one in here, but I'm kind of just like, yeah, I don't want to press it. It's going to be really hard to think if I can go on and exactly get um, to go to bed and be able to be sure that I wake up around the time that I should. So I'm forced to God dang it. I was hoping that I could squeak in one more review. I was hoping to do the Page Master after this, because that movie is really short. But if I take the time of 2 hours plus an hour and 50, yeah, it's gonna be too late. God dang it, man. I want to try to do more than one review a day, but it's not happening. Um, I think I get to these way too late. I get so procrastinated, and you would honestly think with the way my schedule is that I should probably be able to get more done. Um, but I just don't. Like, there's sometimes where I can be quick to get everything done in my day, or I just like I'm just sucked into a lot of YouTube videos and I just get lost in them, and then just time flies by, and I'm just like, oh, like I should have gotten to this sooner, and I just wait to the very last minute. So I need to get better at that. Uh, if anything, I could be a lot more awake while talking about these videos and not be at the very tail end of when I should probably be going to sleep. Uh, but um, with that said, I'm just gonna get out of here so I can hope to just get this uploaded. Plus, also, with this being 2 hours, people go on and complain about the length. I don't care. Uh, I'll just go on and say just watch the first 20 minutes. That's all you need to watch. But if anything, we get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Tune in for the future, hopefully, review of the Page Master. Uh, at this point, I don't know if this ship has really sailed for Spider Noir. I want to say I'm going to get back to that, but ultimately, every time I try to do one project and think I can squeak that in somewhere, other things come up. I make poor choices, obviously, every time in this channel of what content to do next. So I'm heavily sabotaging myself with making these choices that aren't going to do well on the channel. And luckily, I'm just happy that people are going to stick with this. Um, I don't know. I'm trying my best. I'm just trying to put content out. Anything that I put out, uh, it seems that stuff is there's momentum. It's going well. It seems that people are going on to checking these things out, but it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So luckily, I'm starting to see the numbers go up. I think there's just a lot of people that are at this point just being like, well, I guess I have to watch some video, right? So at least they'll just go on and just see something. Um, if anything, I went on to like, well, hey, somebody comment on this. I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna review this. That's what I just thought. Um, if anything, there could be a lot more people of probably being upset about like about where the channel direction is going. Then I would go on and I would love to have people go on and try to help this channel out. Uh, I'm not saying donate money. I'm not saying um, figure out a way to sponsor the channel. I am just saying um, that's what comments are for. That's what polls are for. Even when I'm to go on and poll people and say, hey guys, yeah, you guys said that you really wanted to watch this content. I go on and then I watch the video, have no views, and I'm just like, well, at some point, I guess somebody that voted on this is going to watch it at some point, right? That's what kind of got me upset, where it's like, okay, there's a good number of people that voted on this, but I'm not seeing vote equal to views. Um, but again, it's probably just about like, well, I wanted this review, but I didn't want that length. Whatever. Like, if anything, um, I am to just try and figure you guys out. I wish I could have more help in that. Um, I wish I wouldn't have to feel that I'm just here to find new people. Um, because I want you as the viewer um, to help every video and help guide this thing with me. Um, because I don't want it to have it feel that it's just my channel, that it's our channel, that we're working together on this. But I don't know. I don't know. Like I always said that I was open to suggestions. There were some times where people would have me review just random episodes of certain things. I'm like if I'm not seeing that there's good numbers that come across the very first video, but like I think like stuff like Rugrats where I got that from, where I'm saying that from. Like eventually I think it did do well enough, but like I guess compared to a lot of other things that went nowhere. But um I didn't know of going on and continuing that as a series. Like if anything for that one video, like there's a lot of times where I've done one off videos and it does crazy well. So I'm like, oh, I guess I'll revisit that, and then it actually still does good numbers, or it does just so numbers. But yeah, but I don't know. Um, again, I will always say that it's like, or I always like I would try to be a person that would try to pride myself on thinking like, oh, I could just do this all myself, and I can get the numbers and I can get every. But like I feel that at this point, I'm just like, I hope that I can get some help. I hope I can get some help from somewhere. Um, because at this point, like just seeing that I'm getting like for X number of days, maybe 5 views on something. I'll get 30 views, 40 views. Woo, all right. Like, this is great. Like, at least it's something. But, like anything that I put across this channel is just not really at all going to go anywhere at this point. Um, it's just not. Like, looking at the most popular videos I've done to now, it's a drastic difference in the numbers. So, and I get that, like, even those, like, they didn't get that way over time, but still, um, I don't know. Like, if anything, it's better if people just can recommend or suggest or uh, just make uh, some kind of something of where they want to see the channel going next, as far as pieces of content, what they want me to review. I'd be happy to go on and have people make suggestions of shows or movies or something that they will go on and they will check out if I do it. Um, because once I started to get to stuff that I had people vote on, and then those went really nowhere, I was just kind of at the point of like throwing it all, like throwing my hat and just being like, all right, let's just go on and let's just do whatever on the channel. Um, any of the lists that I had, all that, but like I'm still going back into the order of the stuff that I've made lists upon. I'm still trying to say that anything that I've mentioned will be feature reviewed, um, because I don't know any better. Plus, also I've made a lot of thumbnails. Uh, I've done all this research to find these projects, and if anyone is to go on and say otherwise, I'd be happy to quickly make up some thumbnails, some mock thumbnails, backgrounds like I did today, um, because like I'm happy when somebody makes a comment and suggests me something, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'll go on and I'll actually look into that, like I have, and I did, and I didn't have much planned otherwise. It was just like, let's just do this. Like, it sounds like a good idea. Like the runtime was something I couldn't ignore. Um, so yeah, so whether this does nothing or not, um, I'm glad to have had this as a piece of content on this channel. Hopefully there's no cancel culture because of what happens in this film. Um, but ultimately, I'm just like, we'll put this out. So thank you. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.